We asked over 900 women, real women between the ages of 50 and 70, a question that most men would never think to ask. Not the question they assume they already know the answer to. Not the question that gets answered with the same predictable guesses that men always make. We asked them directly, honestly, and without any leading. When you see a man who is over 60, what do you actually notice first? And the answers that came back were not what most men expect. They were not what I expected either, if I am being completely honest with you. And there was one specific body area that came up more consistently than anything else on the entire list, mentioned by more women than any other response, that virtually every man I have ever spoken to would never guess in a million years. But before I get to that, I want to tell you something that several of the women said before they even answered the question. Because I think it reframes everything that follows in a way that is genuinely important. When we asked them, many of them smiled first. And then they said something that I keep thinking about. They said that most men have it completely wrong. When men try to guess what women notice first, they almost always say the same things. Chest, height, shoulders, how muscular he is, how physically imposing his frame is. And these women almost unanimously said that those guesses missed the point entirely. Not just partially, entirely. Because here is what they told us. And this is the thing I really want you to sit with before we go any further. After 60, attraction works differently. Women in this stage of life are not making comparisons to 25-year-olds. They are not holding men up against some standard of youth that nobody past a certain age could realistically meet. That is not what they are doing when they observe a man. What they are actually doing is something far more interesting and far more nuanced. They are reading signals, quiet, nonverbal signals that communicate something much deeper than how impressive a physique looks. They are reading signals of energy, of self-respect, of whether a man is still genuinely fully engaged with his own life. One woman said something during our conversations that I have not been able to stop thinking about since. She said, "When I see a man now, I am not asking how young he looks, I am asking whether he still looks alive." That sentence, whether he still looks alive, that came up again and again in different forms throughout all of our conversations. And what it points to is something that psychologists actually have a name for. They call it nonverbal presence. The way your body communicates information about how you are actually living your life long before you open your mouth and say a single word. Your habits, your discipline, your relationship with yourself, your attitude toward your own aging. All of it gets broadcast through the body constantly, whether you are aware of it or not. And women, especially women who have lived enough life to know what they are actually looking for, read that broadcast with remarkable accuracy. So today I want to walk you through all 7 of the specific body areas that came up most consistently in our survey. And I want to go beyond just telling you what those areas are, because that alone is not enough. I want to tell you what each one actually communicates at a psychological level. What story it tells, why it matters as much as it does. Because once you understand the why, these things stop being a checklist and start being a completely different way of thinking about how you present yourself to the world. Let us start with the first one, and I will be honest with you. When I first heard this was at the top of the list, I almost thought it was too obvious to be interesting. But the more the women explained their reasoning, the more I understood why it is actually the foundation of everything else. The first thing is posture. Now, before you think, yes, I know, stand up straight, I want you to hear what these women were actually saying about it. Because they were not talking about posture the way a gym instructor talks about it. They were not talking about spinal alignment or correct form. They were talking about what posture communicates before anyone has processed a single conscious thought about the man they are looking at. Over 70% of the women in our survey said that posture reveals more about a man's daily life than his actual fitness level does. 70%. And when they explained why, the answer was consistent and fascinating. Posture is the first thing visible when a man enters a space, before his face is clear, before anyone can see what he is wearing, before any other detail registers. The way his body carries itself is already telling a story. And the story it tells is not about how much he can bench press or how many miles he runs. It is about whether he is still mentally present and engaged with the world he is moving through. Shoulders that are pulled forward and a head that drops down and an upper back that curves inward. like the body is slowly collapsing into itself. All of that communicates something specific before a single word is spoken. It communicates withdrawal, fatigue, a quiet kind of defeat, the visual language of someone who has started, even if only slightly, to give up. And here is the contrast that the women describe that I think captures the whole thing perfectly. Picture a man with genuinely broad shoulders, someone who has clearly spent years building a strong physical frame. Now imagine that man walking into a room with his head dropped forward and his back curved and his presence somehow low and withdrawn despite the physical size of him. And then picture a completely average man standing next to him, maybe carrying a little extra weight, nothing physically imposing about him at all, but standing straight, chest open, chin level, eyes forward. Who do you think gets noticed more? Every single woman we spoke to said the second man, without hesitation. Because posture is not communicating physical strength. It is communicating life. It is communicating whether the person inside the body has somewhere to be, something to care about, something worth standing up for. And the genuinely encouraging thing about posture is that it is not fixed. It is a habit. It is the accumulated result of thousands of small daily choices about how you hold yourself. And that means it is completely within your control to change it starting right now, today, with the very next time you stand up and walk somewhere. Now let us talk about number 2. And this one genuinely surprised many of the men I shared it with. Number 2 is your hands. Multiple women in our survey said that hands reveal more truth about a man than almost any other part of his body. And the first reaction most men have when they hear that is to think it is about strength or grip or how masculine the hands look physically. But that is not what the women were describing at all. What they were talking about is condition, maintenance, the quiet evidence of whether a man pays attention to the details of himself or whether those details get ignored entirely. Here is why hands matter so specifically. They are always visible. You cannot choose to hide them the way you might choose what shirt to wear or how you style your hair. Every time you reach across a table, open a door, hold a cup, pass something to someone, shake a hand, your hands are fully visible and fully communicating. And what women notice is not the natural changes that come with age. They are not judging visible veins or the natural shift in skin texture that happens over decades. They understand that those things are universal and inevitable. What they notice is whether care has been taken, are the nails trimmed and even, is the skin reasonably maintained, or is it cracked and rough in a way that suggests those hands have not received a single moment of attention in months. One woman said something that I thought captured it perfectly. She said hands show whether a man still pays attention to the small parts of his life. And that observation ripples outward in a way that matters. Because when hands are genuinely neglected, the thought it triggers is not just about hands. It is a broader question about attention and self-respect. If he does not notice this, what else is he not noticing? It becomes a small but clear window into a man's relationship with himself. The good news is that maintaining your hands takes genuinely minimal time and effort. A few minutes once a week. Trimming nails, keeping the skin in reasonable condition. That is it. And the return on that small investment, in terms of what it communicates about you, is completely disproportionate to the effort required. One thing worth noting from our conversations: calluses were not seen negatively at all. Hands that show evidence of real physical work, real activity, real engagement with building and fixing and doing things in the world were consistently described as attractive. What is unattractive is not roughness from use. It is roughness from neglect. There is a significant difference between the two. Number 3 is the one that surprised men the most consistently when we shared these results. And that is the neck and jawline. More than 80% of the women said this area influences their first impression of a man more than his muscle size does. More than 80%. And I want to make sure I explain this properly because it is easy to misunderstand what they were actually responding to. The neck and jawline for these women are not about expecting the sharp, angular jaw of a man in his early 30s. That expectation is completely gone from the equation. They understand biology. They understand that fat distribution changes with age, that skin loses some of its tightness over time, that the neck area is one of the first places those changes become visible. None of that is what they are evaluating. What they are reading in this area is discipline, self-control, Evidence of whether a man is making any conscious effort to maintain himself versus whether he has simply decided that maintenance is no longer worth the trouble. Because here is the reality. Some men, as they move through their 60s, take modest but consistent steps to stay engaged with their own health. They watch what they eat reasonably carefully. They stay active in ways that keep their body from entirely surrendering to inactivity. And even modest levels of that kind of attention make a visible difference in this area. Even relatively small reductions in overall body fat can restore meaningful definition around the jawline and neck. The difference is not dramatic. It does not require extreme effort, but it is clearly visible, and what it communicates goes far beyond the physical. A man who maintains definition in his jawline and neck past 60 is visually broadcasting that he still cares, that he is still paying attention, that he has not given himself permission to simply stop. And that signal, quiet as it is, registers powerfully. Number 4 is the forearms. And the reason this one surprises so many men is that forearms are almost never what men focus on when they think about physical fitness or appearance. The chest, the biceps, the shoulders, those get all the attention. The forearms get almost none. And yet in everyday life, forearms are one of the most consistently visible parts of a man's body. Every time you roll up your sleeves, carry something, reach across a counter, open a door, gesture during a conversation in short sleeves, your forearms are right there, fully visible, telling a story. What women are reading in forearms is not size in the bodybuilder sense. They are reading capability, practical, real-world usefulness. The kind of strength that suggests a man can handle physical tasks, can carry things, can engage with the physical world in a functional and grounded way. Natural tone that comes from actual daily use. Carrying groceries, doing physical work around the house, gardening, fixing things, creates exactly the quality they are responding to. It looks like a life being lived actively, rather than passively. And forearms that are thin and entirely untoned tell the opposite story. A story of very limited physical engagement with the world. And that story, while never the whole picture, influences perception in ways that most men would be surprised by if they knew about it. Now we get to number 5. And this is one that is easy to underestimate because it sounds simple. Number 5 is your smile. But not the performance of a smile. Not the wide, eager, trying too hard grin that comes from wanting to appear likable. The specific quality of smile that consistently came up in our conversations was the genuine, relaxed, naturally occurring smile. The kind that reaches the eyes and cheeks rather than just moving the mouth. The kind that appears at the right moments because something actually warranted it rather than being switched on constantly as a social performance. Women describe the man who smiles easily and genuinely as seeming more present, more comfortable in himself, more emotionally accessible. There is a quality of warmth and safety that a natural smile communicates that no amount of physical maintenance can replicate. It makes people feel that connecting with this man would be easy and pleasant rather than guarded and effortful. And in a man over 60, a genuine smile carries an additional layer of meaning. It suggests that this person has arrived at a stage of life where he is comfortable, where he is not burdened by the anxious striving that often keeps younger men from being fully present, where he is at peace enough with himself and his life that warmth comes naturally and easily. You do not need to smile constantly. In fact, the women were very clear that authenticity matters far more than frequency. A calm, natural smile that appears when something actually produces it is infinitely more compelling than a permanent performance smile that is clearly there whether anything warrants it or not. Number 6 is the eyes. And this is one where what women are reading is both immediately obvious and very deep at the same time. They are not looking at the color of your eyes. They are not evaluating their shape or any other physical characteristic. What they are reading in a man's eyes is presence. Whether there is someone actually home behind them. Whether the person looking at them from across a room or across a table is genuinely there, mentally and emotionally engaged with what is happening in front of them, or whether they are somewhere else entirely. A steady, relaxed, attentive gaze communicates that a man is fully present in the moment. Balanced eye contact during conversation shows composure and a kind of settled self-assurance that has nothing to do with performance. Eyes that look alert and genuinely curious suggest that this man is still interested in the world, still finding things worth paying attention to. still engaged with life in a way that has not been dimmed by age or fatigue, or the slow withdrawal that affects some men as they move into their later decades. And that quality, eyes that are alive and present and genuinely curious, becomes increasingly rare and therefore increasingly noticeable and attractive as people age. Because here is the truth. It is not difficult to find a man over 60 with a strong physical frame. It is not even that difficult to find a man over 60 who is well-groomed and well-dressed. But a man over 60 whose eyes still carry genuine aliveness, genuine presence, genuine curiosity about the world. That man stands out in a room of his peers in a way that no amount of physical maintenance alone could produce. Which brings us to number 7. The one that women said reveals more about a man before he even speaks than anything else on the entire list. And that is the way he moves. Not just how he stands, which we covered with posture, but the specific quality of movement as he travels through space. The pace of his steps, the way his arms move with his stride. Whether his movements look intentional and controlled, or whether they look heavy and effortful and withdrawn. When a man walks with steady, even, controlled steps, when his movements look deliberate without being stiff, when his pace feels balanced and his shoulders are open and his head is level, the overall effect is one of quiet authority. Not aggression, not performance. Just the natural confidence of someone who is comfortable occupying the space he is in. And that quality, calm, deliberate movement, does not require athleticism. It does not require a particular body type or a particular level of fitness. It requires only that a man be genuinely present in his own body, that he be moving through the world consciously and intentionally, rather than just occupying it passively. The women describe this quality as one of the most immediately felt signals of whether a man is still fully engaged with life. Slow and heavy and withdrawn movement suggests someone who is enduring their days. Deliberate and steady and open movement suggests someone who is still living them. And that distinction, felt immediately and instinctively before a single word is spoken, is the difference between a man who gets noticed and a man who does not. So let me bring all of this together now. Because when you look at all 7 of these things as a whole, something becomes very clear. None of them are about competing with youth. Not one of them requires you to look younger than you are or to pretend that aging is not happening or to achieve any standard of physical perfection. Every single one of them is about something much simpler and much more achievable. They are about self-respect, about the quiet, consistent daily choice to care about yourself and the life you are living, to pay attention to the details, to stay present and engaged and active in a world that makes it easy, especially past a certain age, to slowly withdraw. Posture tells people whether you are still engaged with life. Hands tell people whether you pay attention to the details of yourself. Neck and jawline tell people whether you are making any effort to maintain yourself. Forearms tell people whether you are still physically active in the real world. Your smile tells people whether you are comfortable and at peace with yourself. Your eyes tell people whether there is genuine aliveness behind everything else. And the way you move tells people whether you are living your days or simply enduring them. None of this requires dramatic effort. None of it requires you to become someone you are not, or to achieve some unrealistic standard. It requires only that you decide clearly and consistently that you are worth the effort, that your presence in the world still deserves your attention, that the story your body tells about you is a story you are consciously choosing to write rather than one that is just happening to you by default. Because that decision, the decision that you have not given up on yourself, is ultimately what every single one of these 7 signals is communicating. And it is the most attractive thing a man over 60 can possibly project. Not youth, not perfection, just the unmistakable, quiet, powerful signal of a man who still looks completely and fully alive,